We are trying to get to 17,000 subscribers here at Bengals Breakdown by the end of the month of February. So help us out. Hit that sub button, youtube.com/BengalsTV. We'll be here all off season long, detailing the NFL draft, of course, and free agency. So we got over 300 subs we need by the end of the month. Help us out. Hit that sub button right now. You are watching Bengals Breakdown by Chat Sports, and I am your host, Stone Shields. Coming up on today's show, we're going to be talking about Germaine Pratt. Obviously, we spent yesterday's show talking about Germaine Pratt, but there's some more stuff to unpack with his situation. Of course, he requested a trade from the Cincinnati Bengals on Wednesday. This is a guy that's one of the longest tenured Cincinnati Bengals, right? He was a third-round pick back in 2019. He came in with Zach Taylor, and overall, when you look at his 6 years here in Cincinnati, certainly some ups, certainly some downs, but some quality takeaways certainly during his time as the Bengals starting linebacker, and he is entering the final year of his 3-year deal. So it is my theory that he kind of went to the front office and said, hey, I'm looking for an extension, and they said no, and thus he requested a trade. And to be honest with you, I'm not surprised by this whatsoever, right? Again, we talked about Germaine Pratt being a cut candidate going into next season for Cincinnati. The Bengals needed a complete revamp on defense. That's what happens, right, when you have all these talented players around your roster, all these top-of-the-league players around your roster, you still fail to make the playoffs due to your defense and your performance on that side of the football. Need a complete rehaul there, and I think really Germaine Pratt's one of the focal points when it comes to that revamp on defense. So again, he was going to get cut, in my opinion, with new leadership coming in on the defensive side of the football. Lou Anarumo, who, by the way, we'll talk about him at the end of today's show, has been Germaine Pratt's defensive coordinator throughout the entirety of his career. Now Al Golden comes in. He's probably looking for a new guy to kind of be calling the shots out there defensively, wants to probably bring in someone else, or, of course, draft and develop a guy at that linebacker spot opposite Logan Wilson. But the question now at this point is Cincinnati going to be able to get anything in return, right? Again, he was probably going to get cut by this football team, but there's people around the league that anticipate that the Bengals could perhaps get something in return for Germaine Pratt when it comes to a trade. Really, if the Bengals are able to pull anything off, get a 6th-round pick or a 7th-round pick, that would be a major win for this organization, in my opinion. Let's take a look at what Cincinnati has as far as their draft picks here in 2025. You might be thinking, well, there's only 6 picks in 7 rounds. Well, remember, they dished out that 7th-round pick for Khalil Herbert at the trade deadline. So if you can just get back that 7th-round pick, again, I consider that to be a major win for this Cincinnati Bengals football team. Anything you could get for Germaine Pratt is very beneficial, I think, at this point. Leads to the pinned comment of today's video. Will the Bengals be able to trade Germaine Pratt? Let me know what you guys think in the comment section. Again, there's people around the league that seem to think Cincinnati could pull this off. But let me know, type Y for yes or N for no at the pinned comment of today's video. If that ad comes here on YouTube, totally fine. Take advantage of it. Get down in the comments and let us know what you think. Let's talk some numbers here with his contract. So his cap hit in 2025 would be around $8 million. He's set to make $5.6 million this season. And if you cut him or trade him, you do have to incur a $2.3 million dead money penalty, essentially. But you could also end up freeing $5.8 million in cap space if you were able to trade him, or, of course, if you cut him as well. So really lots of benefits financially if you're able to move on from Germaine Pratt in the grand scheme of things. Talking about his performance out there on the football field, as I talked about at the top of the show, certainly some ups and downs throughout his career. I think 2024 certainly was the low point of his career, despite the fact he had a career-high 143 tackles this season, which, of course, did lead the Cincinnati Bengals as a football team. But I always think tackles, especially for a linebacker, kind of a misleading stat, right? When you play that position, you're going to get tackles. That kind of just comes with playing the linebacker position. And since Al Golden left, he really hasn't been great, right? After that Super Bowl run when Golden first took the job at Notre Dame, you haven't seen the best out of Germaine Pratt. He allowed 460 yards after the catch per PFF, which is tied for the second most among NFL linebackers. And also, he led the Bengals in missed tackles with 20 this past season. Obviously, missed tackles was an issue all throughout the Cincinnati Bengals defense, but it really kind of was spearheaded by Germaine Pratt at that linebacker position. And also, his missed tackle rate was really bad. Shout out to Paul Daynard Jr. kind of crunching these numbers for The Athletic. He said that Pratt ranked 26th out of the 32 linebackers with at least 75 tackles in missed tackle rate. That's 12.7%. So that certainly was an issue for Germaine Pratt. Also didn't have any sacks this past season. Neither did Logan Wilson. But at that linebacker position, especially when the Bengals really struggled on the defensive line, would have been nice to at least get a couple sacks from your linebacker. Cincinnati was not able to do that. But I do want to give Germaine Pratt some credit. In my opinion, he is always going to be a Bengals legend for this moment right here. Of course, this was back in the 2021 Super Bowl run. This was the wild card round against the Las Vegas Raiders. Derek Carr threw an interception basically at the buzzer. I think there was 15 seconds or so left. The Bengals had a 7-point lead. They were holding on for dear life, and Germaine Pratt picked him off in the goal line. This is something that you hang up in your basement of your house, right? This is an unbelievable play in Bengals history, and he will always be a legend for making this play. And by the way, he also was voted a captain in 2024. Not necessarily sure that kind of is a good thing considering how the defense played under his captainship, but at the same time, I think the Bengals, his teammates, they respected the tenure that he had enough to vote him a captain in 2024. So this is a guy that certainly brought some good things to the organization, but all good things must come to an end at some point. Latter half of today's show, we're going to be talking about some Germaine Pratt trade destinations. Got 3 teams for you guys. Fansided came up with the list. We'll be breaking down those 3 teams here in a moment. But first, want to give a shout out to our friends over at Fanatics. Let you guys know that Bengals Sideline hats are available now. There's a bunch of cool ones up there on their website, so I really encourage you guys to get over there and check some of them out. I've got a few of these myself. Love rocking them whenever I can. By the way, this link will be in the comments section and the description of today's video, so really encourage you guys to get over there and check out some Bengals Sideline hats, courtesy of our friends over at Fanatics. All right, 3 teams here that we're going to be talking about as far as potential landing spots for Germaine Pratt if the Bengals indeed are able to trade him. First up, obviously the Indianapolis Colts. I think anybody could come up with this. Again, these are fan-sided suggestions, but I think if I was making suggestions, I certainly would have the Colts at number 1. Why? Because Lou Anarumo is with Indianapolis as their defensive coordinator. Again, Pratt has spent the entirety of his 6-year career playing under Lou Anarumo as his defensive coordinator. There's already been some rumblings about him potentially heading to Indianapolis, whether via a trade or if the Bengals ultimately cut him and he just ends up signing there. This is what Charlie Clifford does a great job covering. Really all Cincinnati sports put out there on Twitter. Said there have been rumblings for a couple weeks about Germaine Pratt's interest in reuniting with Lou Anarumo in Indianapolis. With his future very much up in the air in Cincinnati, going public with a trade request is a move that felt inevitable. The Colts really have some solid linebackers that I've talked about, on our show here at Bengals Breakdown. I think Lou Anarumo is really going to have a lot of success as the defensive coordinator of the Indianapolis Colts because he does a great job of, schematically defensively, right? Certainly the drafting and the development side of things is something that he kind of struggled with in Cincinnati over the past few years, but there's a ton of good pieces there in Indianapolis when you think about Zaire Franklin, E.J. Speed, probably their best 2 linebackers. I think Germaine Pratt certainly could carve out a role for him, and he's certainly a guy that Lou Anarumo trusts out there, which I think is very important when it comes to Lou Anarumo and the change of scenery he has going to a new home, first time in a long time, going to Indianapolis from Cincinnati. Another opportunity for you guys to get involved. Our show here at Bengals Breakdown. Will Germaine Pratt reunite with Lou Anarumo? Let me know in the comments section. Type A for yes or B for no. Next up here is the Dallas Cowboys. And I think really the main reason that Dallas is on this list is because of the injury that DeMarvion Overshown suffered last season, coincidentally, against the Cincinnati Bengals. Look, I think DeMarvion Overshown is an unbelievable football player. He was having an unbelievable season, then ultimately he does get hurt. He's probably not going to be able to go at the beginning of the 2025 season. So if you're Dallas, you're certainly looking to add at that linebacker position. Pratt certainly is a veteran guy that has a lot of experience in the National Football League. But I don't think Dallas would be too hyped to get a guy like Germaine Pratt because he certainly has struggled the past couple of years, and they're probably looking for a little more youth at that position, despite the fact that they need someone to come in and really replace DeMarvion Overshown, most likely at the beginning of the 2025 season. Last up here is the Philadelphia Eagles, the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. And really the biggest reason that they're on this list is because they have a lot of free agents that we'll get to here in a moment that they have planned for them at the defensive side of the ball and really linebacker more specifically. Here's what Fansided had to say about Germaine Pratt potentially going to Philadelphia. Fansided said, but Eagles general manager Howie Roseman is a guy who isn't afraid to make a move, and perhaps trading for Pratt would be a way for Philadelphia to offset some of their potential losses at the position in free agency. Pratt has a reasonable $5.25 million salary for the next season, and he'll be an unrestricted free agent in 2026, so trading for him wouldn't necessarily have to be a long-term commitment from Philly. Taking a look at some of these linebackers here that will be free agents for the Philadelphia Eagles. Zach Bond at the top of this list. Zach Bond was really, of course, Saquon Barkley was an unbelievable addition for them as well. But beyond Barkley, really their most important piece that they added was Zach Bond. And I don't know if they win the Super Bowl without Zach Bond, to be completely honest with you. But I'm sure that Howie Roseman is going to be doing everything he can to get Zach Bond back. Josh Sweat, I think, was a popular name. In free agency circles around the league, teams trying to get Josh Sweat. But what happened in the Super Bowl? He absolutely went off. I believe he had 2.5 sacks in that game, so Philly might be trying to hold on to him as well. Also of note, Brandon Graham probably going to retire, right? He's getting up there in age. I think he's probably around 37 years of age. Two-time world champion, has spent the entirety of his career with the Philadelphia Eagles. So they have some decisions to make at linebacker. And again, Germaine Pratt could potentially be a good option for him for at least a year. Now, if you made it to the end of today's video, you are a real one. We appreciate you. Show your love for us by hitting that thumbs up icon right now.